Hey guys, so when I think about hearing from the Lord, when I think about silence and solitude, I can't help but think about the story. I would say it's the most clear, obvious way I've ever heard directly from God, probably ever. I would say it's, just this clear voice. Now, let me explain. So, you may have heard the story before, I don't know, but I love telling it because it just so was formative for me, and it was recent. It was just about 4 years ago. I was actually leaving the CCC at the end of the day, heading home. It was when we still lived in Crum at the time. And I'm driving in my truck. I'm just about to turn off the 35 service road onto the main road that takes you to Crum. It was a typical, I don't know, just any old Tuesday or something like that during the week, and something rare was taking place in that moment. What was rare was my mind was a complete blank. That never happens. I mean, there's always something going on in here, whether it's productive or I'm off in la la imaginary happy land. There's always a little bouncy ball bouncing and things spinning. That was not the case in that moment. I was literally not thinking about a thing other than driving. I should probably do that more often. I'm sure I was driving very, very responsibly because of that. But anyway, also the other rare occurrence was that it was silent in my truck. I didn't have my radio blasting, which I typically would have the stereo blasting if I'm not in like deep thought or on the phone or in prayer or something. And so it was in this moment of complete silence, even though I wasn't sitting on some mountaintop, humming, being in some kind of really heightened spiritual awareness state, like I often think about when I think about silence and solitude. I usually think I need to get in that kind of space, like we had at the detox retreat recently. That quiet time that's really quality and focused. And while that's great, it doesn't mean that that's the only way God's going to speak to you. So in that moment of silence, both inside my head and outside, in that moment I hear this voice, and it wasn't audible. It wasn't something my ears heard. It was in my mind. So just like right now, for instance, right now, quote the Pledge of Allegiance in your head. Don't say it out loud, just quote it. You can hear it in your mind, but you can't hear it with your ears, right? Like we can hear it clearly. So it's that type of a voice. And that voice just jumps into my head, into my thoughts. And it goes like this. It's in the form of a conversation. The voice says, "Hey, Brandon, you know how every time you preach and every single time you go out and do evangelism on campus or out in the streets, anytime you study the Bible with somebody, you always ask to be filled with the Holy Spirit, for the Spirit to speak through you, and for the Spirit to touch the hearts of the people that you're preaching to or teaching. Why are you not praying that every time you go home?" And it hit me like with so much conviction. I was like, oh my word. Why haven't I been praying that every time I go home? I'm so intentional about being spirit-filled and spirit-led when it comes to ministry, but my most important ministry is to my family. And so often I come home at the end of the day with my to-do list that Brandon wants to do. I want to work out. I want to go for a walk, play basketball, play with the kids, make dinner, watch the Mavericks. I've got this list of stuff I want to do, or maybe it's a list of things I need to do, like yard work or whatever. And I don't know what I'm going to walk into when I get home. My wife's been teaching all day. She's exhausted and worn out. She needs adult interaction really badly. My kids, I may walk into a whirlwind of emotions, meltdown city. They may all be tired. They may be in a great mood. I never know. It's a big unknown as soon as I open that door, and I need to be prepared for that. To continue being a minister, to continue speaking words of life and encouragement to my most important ministry. So anyway, it was a huge conviction for me in that moment. I was humbled because I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm at this point So 4 years ago at this point, Macy's 10. So I've been a dad now for 10 years, and I've been a husband now for 13 years. How am I just now praying this prayer? Like, that's terrible. But obviously, I immediately was praying this prayer and praying with a whole lot of conviction. So here's the cool thing. It was immediate affirmation from God. When I get home that evening, after praying this prayer, we're sitting at the dinner table, which doesn't happen as often as it should. But we're sitting at the dinner table, and I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to come up with some family devo. I really kind of stink at it. I'm good at working with adults and young adults and like trying to create something that's going to make sense for a kid. I don't do as hot at. I need Heather to help me a lot on those. And so I didn't have something ready or prepared or anything, and I didn't have to. God had it all under control. So Macy starts out by asking some kind of question about God or about heaven, and it launches us into this awesome, engaging conversation that lasted the whole meal and after dinner. And both Molly and Macy, even though, I guess Molly was only 6, she's young, and we just have this awesome, beautiful spiritual conversation that continued like almost the rest of the evening. And we kind of pause and get the kids ready for bed and everything. And we're putting them down for the night. And Macy, we say our prayer, and our prayer was so much more focused and deep and spiritual than it normally was at a bedtime prayer. But here's the awesome thing. So as soon as we get done with these prayers, Macy looks up at me with this big smile. She's 10. She had just recently been baptized. And she goes, "Dad, can't you just feel the Holy Spirit right now?" And I was like, yeah. It was awesome. So it was just that immediate affirmation from the Lord. And he's just like, "Hey, see what happens, Brandon? See what happens when you invite me in, when you're looking to me, and when you're continuing your ministry with my power, my spirit working through you to your family when you get home. See what happens?" And so anyway, I share that story primarily with other families and parents and ministers to remind us of that importance. But I want to share it with you tonight because I want you to realize that God speaks that way. I want you to know when somebody says, "Yeah, I heard from the Lord," I grew up, man, I was real skeptical. I'm like, okay, I don't know what you've been smoking out here on Fry Street. I didn't believe that God spoke that way. I don't think that way anymore, obviously. And so I do know he speaks in a wide variety of very unique ways. But that's just one example. It's my favorite example of feeling like I heard from the Lord. But here's the thing. That beautiful story doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen, at least not that night. Hopefully it would have, but not that night. It wouldn't have happened if I had my radio blasting. If I had just been, going 90 to nothing in my mind with all the things that I'm thinking about, or on the cell phone or whatever, if I had clouded my mind and my environment with noise like it typically is cluttered with, I would have missed that voice of God. I wouldn't have heard it. And so I hope that really makes an impression on you to create that space make it more holy than driving if you can, okay? But even in the midst of driving, we have that solitude and that silence. I think we're inviting Jesus into that space to speak to us when we can clear our minds, clear the room, clear the sound, silence the noise and the voices that compete with God's voice. So I hope that's encouraging for you. I hope that makes sense. And I hope you're hearing from the Lord because he speaks. We got to be listening.